I'm sure we're all familiar with the story of how Moshe Rabbeinu found the daughters of Yisro being persecuted at the well, and he goes and saves these young women. And the daughters come home to mom and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Yisro, at the house, and mom and dad do, I guess, what any future Jewish mother-in-law and father would say: no, you didn't bring him home. Va'ayo. Torah has a very interesting word. Va'ayo. Where is he? Why didn't you bring him home? The Malbim has a beautiful double entendre on this word va'ayo. Where is he? Very strange word. Where is he? The Malbim says it's not just that any person you meet who does a good thing for you, you're supposed to bring home. The Malbim says no. Va'ayo means like this. You would think that a stranger who helps out people at a well, you think maybe he's going to come and get something for it. Maybe he'll say, maybe you could pay me for my services. Maybe you'll bring me home and give me some food. I'm a stranger wandering in a strange land. I just help you out. Maybe you'll give me something back in return. But Yisro saw the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu did not ask for anything in return for the service that he performed. This was an indication that they really should have been bringing him home. So va'ayo, he didn't show up here for anything. Must be he's a special person. You really should bring him home because maybe this is someone to get more involved with. And when I was thinking about how to introduce this morning's speaker, Ben Brafman. So everybody here knows about all the high-profile cases that Ben Brafman has been involved in. He's an unbelievably successful defense attorney. But to me, what's most impressive about Mr. Brafman are not the high-profile cases that he has been successful at. It's that any time there's something that's going on in our neighborhood, in our community, that the Jewish people need something, that the state of Israel needs something, the first person to get involved is Ben Brafman. And not only is he involved in so many activities in our community, he's been MC at countless dinners and functions, but even on a day like today, where a person who's as busy as he is can look forward to one day, take a little bit of a break, to relax a little bit. He's not getting anything out of today. The only thing he's getting at is a chance to help other people. A chance to come here to help inspire us to talk about Kiddush Hashem. Not only is he a Kiddush Hashem in the workplace, and he's spoken to so many people, and we're so excited to hear what he has to say this morning to us. But just the very fact that he showed up here to our yeshiva today, as far as I'm concerned, that's a Kiddush Hashem by itself. It's a lesson to our students. When you have a day off, you have a break, you can even find ways on your time off to really be productive, to help out the Jewish people, to help inspire a couple more people. And we really thank him so much for taking his time to share his words with us. Please give your attention to Ben Brafman.
Thank you, Rabbi Kamenetsky. I'm still trying to figure out how I got here on my one day off in many, many months. Actually started with a conversation with Shlomo Gottesman, who says to me, you're a lawyer? I said, yes. He says, you believe in the Constitution? I said, of course. He said, you believe in the First Amendment, right to free speech? He said, yes. He said, how'd you like to give one? So I'm here, and I see a lot of familiar faces. I see a lot of sort of unfamiliar faces, and my face is becoming increasingly familiar, and it's a blessing and a curse, because you always recognize that people sort of know who you are, so it's additional pressure. And that's part of the theme I want to convey to you, because nobody in this room who wears a yarmulke and walks the streets of the 5 towns or Manhattan or Eretz Yisrael is anonymous. You are a public Jew. And you have an achrayus that you carry with you every day because you represent all of us. So when you screw up, it's not a private matter. When you do something obnoxious, it's not a private matter. And it's interesting because when I got the invitation from Rav Kamenetsky, and I know he's not the same Kamenetsky heritage as the great Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky Olav Shalom, who personally threw me out of yeshiva. So there's a certain irony to being brought back here as a role model by a Rabbi Kamenetsky 50 years later. And I hope Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky has a little bit of nachas out of this. Maybe, I have a little bit of Jewish nakama. But I remember when I was being escorted out of the building, I'll never forget what one of the Rebbeim, not Rabbi Kamenetsky, one of the Rebbeim said something to my father. He says, it's not right for this yeshiva, but your son, we think, has been blessed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the ability to communicate effectively. Maybe one day, Bezrat Hashem, he will use it for something good. So to the extent that I may have been blessed with the ability to communicate effectively, this is my way of trying to do a little bit of tshuva and also a little bit of good. I'm not here because I want more business. It would be my greatest dream never to have to represent another firm person for the rest of my life. I never want to hear in a prison visiting room the words Tati Kimahaim, Daddy come home, as a 4-year-old is leaving the room after visiting his father, and he wants his father to come with him. And his father can't. Go try explain that to a 4-year-old. So to the extent that the adults or even the young people in this room think at some point of taking a shortcut or crossing a line, remember the words Tati Kimahaim, and I think it may resonate that you never want to be in the position where you can have to listen to that and not be able to go home. So I want to talk about the subject of the hour, Kiddush Hashem, Chillul Hashem. And I am not a Rav. I have a brother who most of you know or heard of in Barakwe, who is a Rosh Hashiva and a real Talmud Chacham, and I have a son in Eretz Yisrael who is a Rosh Hashiva and a real Talmud Chacham. I'm not. Ask them. They'll tell you I'm a nice guy. They will tell you I'm a nice guy. I know some stuff. I'm not a complete Amaritz. But I'm not here to give you a Dvar Torah, and I'm not here to give you Musar, even though it may sound like Musar. And I'm going to make a statement that's going to immediately sound like a lack of derech eretz for the Rabbanim in the room. And it's not intended that way. I am the most observant person in this room. With all respect to the Rabbanim here, who are much more frum than I am, I think, the most observant. Because the word observant is used in 2 ways. You can be observant of Shomer Torah mitzvahs, and there are machmers that people invent and apply to themselves that I will never rise to that level, by choice, I think. But at the end of the day, the word observant is also used to mean you are able to see what's going on. You're in a position that allows you to observe what a lot of people don't necessarily observe, or if they do observe it, doesn't resonate the way it does with me, because I am a public Jew in a secular world. I don't operate within the shtetl. I don't work within a yeshiva. I work in the world on a public stage. And I'm not just talking about my high-profile cases that many of you have read about. The best work I've ever done is the people I've kept from being indicted or kept from being arrested, who you never read about and will never read about, who are because of me, I think, back home where they belong and leading productive lives. So it's not because I represent occasionally a very, very famous, person. I keep checking my BlackBerry to see an email from Bill Cosby, but so far it hasn't. my luck will call on Shabbos. So at the end of the day, by being a public person, I'll tell you what I see. What I see is what many of you see as well, because this doesn't require a public perspective. The world doesn't like Jews. Not a Kiddush. But I'm strong enough as a personality to admit it, say it, understand it, and try to do something about it. Now, there's basic anti-Semitism throughout the world for reasons that we will never completely understand, and it's been that way since the beginning of history, certainly beginning of Jewish history. Every generation there's an Amalek who wants to destroy us, and we're pretty nice people, so I don't get it, and I never will get it, but there are people who just hate us because we are Jewish. Not because we are religious Jews, simply because we are Jewish, and there are people who hate us enough that they want to kill us, even though by killing us they will be killing themselves. That's a level of hate very, very hard to even grasp. And today in Tel Aviv there was a shooting again. Several people were killed, many people were wounded. Random act. I was in Yerushalayim last Shabbos, and you're walking down the street, and it's different because every person who passes you is now someone who you're trying to decide, how am I going to defend myself if that person decides I'm the next Jew that they want to stab. So we're in a very perilous time, and it has nothing to do with the fact that we are religious, because the world hates Jews. And because the world hates Jews, we don't need to give them any more reason to hate us by conducting ourselves in a way that is offensive in public or inappropriate. And I'm not just talking about illegal activity. Let me make something clear that may come as a surprise, and I hope it doesn't. We are a very good people. By far the most honest, charitable group of people in the world. I'm talking about the Jewish community. I was once representing a very, very, very wealthy guy whose tax returns I was going through, and he had made hundreds of millions of dollars. And then I looked on his Schedule C, and his charitable contributions for the year were $350. And he had them itemized. Boy Scouts, $10. Art Association, $10. And I looked across the table and I said, my God, you and your wife are really charitable people. And he didn't understand the sarcasm. His response was, we try and do our part. I said, if you were a member of my tribe, you would be dead. You can't make hundreds of millions of dollars a year and give away $350. What the hell is wrong with you? You should be giving away millions of dollars. I'm not asking you to do it to a yeshiva I belong to. What about like Sloan Kettering? Why are you so not generous? And he didn't understand. He didn't have what we have. He didn't have the Rahmanas factor or the generosity gene that I think we've been born with and we've been blessed with. So I don't want you to think that I'm being critical of the Jewish community per se. It's the best community. It's the most honest. It's the most ethical. It is the most generous. So why is it that the perception of the world is to the contrary? Why is it that, the perception of the world is that from people, and the Haredi people and Hasidim are dishonest? Because when one of us gets in trouble, it gives them the fuel they need to carry on that false impression for the next year, for the next 6 months. See, I told you so. So we have to be more ethical. We have to be more honest. We have to be better at what we do, especially if we're going to conduct ourselves as a public Jew. Now, I don't wear a yarmulke to work, and there are times when in the business world I interact with people where there's going to be a meeting and it's going to be in a restaurant and everyone else will have steak and I'll have fruit salad, but even that my son would never do, my brother would never do. So I make compromises, but when you read in the paper that my trial, which the whole world is watching, was adjourned on Friday at 2 o'clock because lead counsel Brafman had to get home in time for the Sabbath, you have no idea what that little squib does to Jews throughout the world who are fighting with anti-Semitic forces in small towns in Iowa and Kansas where they don't get being Shomer Shabbos. And they say to them, look, he's a big shot lawyer and he observes the Sabbath, so I'm going to observe the Sabbath, and unless you let me observe the Sabbath, I'm going to hire this guy. And I've gotten emails from people. 20 years ago, the trial of the century was the Puff Daddy trial. And it was a very, very difficult argument, as it always is, beginning at noon on Friday. And the judge was a good friend, and he knew I was stopping at 2 o'clock. And we were right in the middle of the argument. And it was in the winter, and Shabbos was going to be at 4 o'clock, and I have a car waiting for me, but it's cutting it close. You don't know the traffic conditions. And the judge, on his own, at 2 o'clock, says, look, we're going to continue this argument at 2 o'clock. Mr. Brafman needs to leave to be home before sundown. That was reported in the New York Times. If I don't do anything else good for the rest of my life, that was good. My brother asked me, why don't you leave at 1 o'clock? I'm only kidding, he was good. So what I'm suggesting is the way if you're going to wear a yarmulke, and you're going to wear a white shirt, and have your tzitzis out, and black pants, and have the whole world identify you as a yeshiva boy, you have an obligation to behave. We're not talking about you shouldn't hold up a liquor store. We're not talking about being illegal. I'm talking about, derech eretz. I'm talking about the kind of stuff that all of us see on Central Avenue, for example, and we take it in stride and we don't do anything about it, and it's wrong, and I, as an observant Jew, when I see it, drives me nuts. So if you're sitting in a pizza store, and there are 4 of you sitting at the table in the front, eating like Hazer, who just got out of a prison, and there is a woman coming into the store with a double stroller, who is making it's almost impossible to get in that door without help. When you're trying to do a double stroller with the door that opens in, even out. Get up and help her. You know why? Because when you don't, the 5 guys behind the counter who are watching this think you have no derech eretz. They talk about that scene when they go home to where they live. And I cannot tell you how many times I'd be waiting online and I would see someone struggling to get in, and the place is covered with yeshiva boys from every yeshiva in town. I'm not talking about DRS exclusively. It runs the gamut. And not one person leaves their pizza to open the door. And I walk over because I'm humiliated. And when I open the door, no one there says anything. No one there gets it. No one there understands. Now, on rare occasions when it happens, I go over and I say something. What you did was very nice. You should be proud of yourself. And when I tell that to the person who does it, he doesn't know how to react because he's doing it instinctively. And if you do it instinctively, you don't think you need to be complimented for it, because what did you do? You got up and you opened the door. This is something, there are fathers in the room, a couple of mothers. I wish there were more mothers in the room, because this is stuff in the home. This is good to talk about in the yeshiva, but this is something for Friday night at the Shabbos table. This is for Shabbos at your Shabbos table. This is the kind of stuff you should be talking about, not just Lashon Hara. This is the kind of stuff you should be asking people about. When I see a frum kid open an ice cream and throw the wrapper on the floor, it drives me crazy. You're not a chaya. And if you're not wearing a yarmulke, nobody knows who you are. You have the anonymity. Now, I can't do it because then the NASA Herald will write the next day, Ben Brafman was a Slav. They don't know who you are, so you can get away with it. But you're not getting away with it because someone who is not from sees it, someone who is not from will comment on it, and ultimately we develop another layer of dislike for a people that doesn't need any more dislike. We have so many tsaras in the world that we don't create, that we do nothing to deserve, that we don't need to instigate sinna. We don't need to instigate hate. And you say, why would they hate you if they see you throwing something on the floor? It's not the point. The point is that it's not good behavior. It's the difference. There's a difference between ethical and dishonest and honest behavior. That's a whole different subject, and we'll talk about it briefly. This is not a legal discussion. This is an observant discussion. This is the stuff I see that bothers me because we should know better. We do know better, and we don't comment on it enough in our community. I go to Dvar Torah after Dvar Torah by Chashiv Rabbanim all the time, and they talk about inyanim that are important, and I'm not being a chutzpahdik or an agnostic, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but many of the inyanim that they talk about have little, if any, bearing on modern-day Orthodox issues that affect you every day and affect me because of you. So, I became a very good lawyer, and you are coming up in a much different atmosphere than when I came up. Today, there's no excuse. You can go to any Wall Street law firm if you are a good enough student, and you will be able to work there and then be off of Shabbos and Yom Tov if you're smart enough that they want you. Because in every major Wall Street law firm today, there are people working there who are Shomer Shabbos. There are people working there who have a kosher section in the dining room. Sullivan Cromwell. When I was trying to become a lawyer, you couldn't get in the door if you wanted to take off on Shabbos. They would look at you like you were crazy. What do you mean? What if we have a closing on a Friday afternoon? You're just going to get up and leave? Today, the real estate department at Sullivan Cromwell has 20 Shomer Shabbos guys who learn at lunchtime, and they have a glatt kosher section of the kitchen. Sullivan and Cromwell must be turning over in their grave. But that's a fact. That's a fact. At Weil Gotshal, you have Jewish from partners at Kasowitz Benson. They have mincha every day in a partner's office. You have no excuse. There is no longer an impediment. In every hospital in the world, you will find doctors and nurses in shakings, doctors in yarmulkes. So there's no longer the bar that you have to overcome. People in my generation have been paving that driveway and shoveling that snow for a long time. And let me tell you something. There were times when it was very, very hard. You try and explain to a judge in Tallahassee, Florida, about the second days of Sukkot. I can't explain that to my Jewish friends. So we've been through that brigade. You don't need to join that army. You now have a much easier path. But you're not going to undo what we've done. And if it's on my watch, I'd like to be able to do something about it, so that if you are out in the public sector and you do come in with or without a yarmulke, and you tell your partner boss that you're going to need to be off for Pesach and that you can't stay late on Friday afternoon, they have to look at you as one of the best lawyers in the firm who are worth having despite this inconvenience. And let me tell you something. Being from is inconvenient. I remember a conversation with Puff Daddy, a Guddle from the rap world, who I represented. And one day he looks at me and he says, "Man, you people have a lot of holidays." And he's right. He's right. We have a lot of days when we can't work. On the other hand, a lot of the firm guys in these firms work extra to make up for it. Come in on Christmas and New Year's when they're not at a yeshiva like this, to show the people who are off those days that they will carry their share of the load. You have no idea how many doctors cover on Christmas for their Goyish colleagues, and what a Kiddush Hashem that is. And it's only fair, and it's right, and it should be encouraged. But that's in specific areas of work. I'm talking about day-to-day stuff. I have a guy who works for me for the last 20 years. He's a guy, an Italian guy, covered with tattoos, looks like a professional weightlifter. He is a driver, bodyguard. Sometimes I go to courthouses 2 o'clock in the morning. It's nice not to be there just with my personality. But he's a big, strong guy. He's a very big, strong guy. You know what scares him? Only one thing. Driving on Central Avenue on Friday afternoon. That's just true. The first time I said to him, I have to stop on Central Avenue on Friday on the way home. Afterwards, he said to me, "Don't make me ever do that again." I said to him, "How bad?" He said, "It was terrible." I said, "Why?" He says, "There are no rules." There are no rules. It's, the word, he didn't use the word balagan, but that's what it is. It's a complete balagan. There are no rules. You want to double park, you double park. You want to leave your car with the door hanging open so no one can leave, you leave the door hanging open. You want to cross, I did crosswalks now on Central Avenue. No one has ever stopped for me when I was in that crosswalk. Since those crosswalks have been painted. Try it on Sunday. Stand in a crosswalk and hope you don't get killed. And most of the people who are not stopping are either wearing yarmulkes or shaitels who have a band filled with screaming kids. Most of them are our friends. Most of them are us. And you know what that does to the people who live here, who are not part of our community? It makes them sad and angry, but it makes me sad. Because it's a reflection on all of us, even though it's not all of us. I'm sure there are many people in this room, or maybe at least some, who have never double parked on Central Avenue. But the next time you come up behind someone double parked on Central Avenue, just stop for a minute and observe the chaos that it creates. Because it's not wide enough for people on both sides to be double parked and people to continue to drive without creating an enormous sakana. And watch when a van opens and 3-4 kids with their tzitzis flying cross the street in middle of the block without looking either way, and their mother or father is in the car on a cell phone. And what are they doing? They're waiting. And if you go up and you say, you really shouldn't park it, my kids are picking up pizza. I said, there's 75 people online in the store. It's going to take 45 minutes. Go around the block, come back for them. This bothers you? This is a conversation. This bothers me? I said, it bothers me, but it should bother you. Look what you're doing here. And then you know what's worse? When a policeman pulls up, what's the first thing they say? I was only here for a minute, I'm dropping off my kids. And the cop's been watching them for 20 minutes. So you're lying to an Irish cop. You're a frum person. You're a very frum person who they believe are supposed to be more devout than them, and you're lying to them. That may not be a crime, but it should be. If a cop tells you to move, you should move. And if you're there for 20 minutes, don't tell them you were there for a minute. And if you're going to Dunkin' Donuts at 2 o'clock in the morning, the bunch of guys who just finished night Seder, you can't act like you were raised by wolves. You can't sit in the room screaming and yelling and telling stories out loud that nobody except your 4 guys are interested in hearing. You know why? Because the people who work behind the counter are listening to you, and they're watching you. You know what they think? They think you're animals. They don't think you're studying to be a Rav or a doctor or a lawyer. They think there's something wrong with you. And that's part of the process. It's not a Mussar speech. This is just a talk. This is a direct conversation by someone who's not a Rav, who watches this stuff, and it drives me crazy. And it bothers me not because I'm such a perfect person, and not because I'm better than you, but because I see how people wince, how they react. I see things you don't see. When I see a frum guy in court behaving like an unethical, dishonest jerk before a judge who knows that he or she is frum, with an adversary who knows that he or she is frum, it bothers me. Because they don't like us to begin with. And now you've given them an additional reason. Let me talk to you for a minute about how you can screw up your life forever. People think, oh, I got to get arrested. And if I get arrested and the record gets sealed, I'm okay. But if I get arrested and the record doesn't get sealed, I'm also okay, so long as it's not a sexual offense where I got to register. It's also okay. Everything's okay. We rationalize and rationalize and rationalize. Let me tell you how you can screw up your life. By hitting the send button. That's it. Just hit the send button. You know, everybody talks about texting and driving. Yeah, it's a big danger if you text and drive. Drive down Rockaway Turnpike on the way home. 90% of the people who are in the car are looking at their cell phone. 90%. I use that road every day. I have the luxury of not driving, so I'm reading and I'm working, and it makes my day more productive, thank God. But I look out the window. Everybody who passes me is driving and texting. Certainly driving and talking. Because God forbid you use a headset, people think you're talking to yourself. So they're driving and texting. So that's an issue, but that's not my issue. That's a safety issue. If you want to kill yourself, hopefully it's only you who you kill. But I'm talking about, we live in a world of technology that's a blessing and a curse. I have lawyers who work for me. I give them an assignment. They come back in 2 hours and it's done. When I was an associate, it took me 2 weeks to do the same assignment. You know why? I had to go, I had to find the books, I had to schlep the books, I had to read from the books, I had to make copies of the cases so I could attach it. I get a memo back. The knowledge is instant. You want to know anything, ask your phone. You want to write a memo, go on to Lexis, and in 20 minutes you can do a memo that used to take us 2 weeks, not because we were stupid, but because we had no shortcut. So you have a shortcut to knowledge. So technology is a blessing. Helps in math, it helps in science, helps in medicine. It's a blessing, but it's also a curse. You know why? Because it's forever. A text, an email, asks Hillary Clinton. Can never be deleted. Ask me. You can take your computer, smash it with a hammer, throw it in the ocean. If they bring it back to me, I have a guy who can restore everything that's on that computer. Everything damning, everything embarrassing, everything incriminating. You have no idea how many shidduchim get canceled because of an errant email or Facebook posting. And I'm telling you that our schools, in not singling out the DRS, I happen to be here, need to be very careful when they teach all of the technology that you learn. I have grandchildren who are 4 or 5 years old who help me fix my computer when it stops. Comes naturally to them. I'm like a dinosaur. But I see every single case, almost every single case I am in now, the most damning piece of evidence, inevitably, is an email or a text. It's worse than a tape recording. It used to be the government taped people. Now they just subpoena or get all of your emails. And you know why it's worse? I was the tape maker. I was able to cross-examine people on specific conversations and imply a completely different meaning because of the tenor of the conversation, the tone. You could tell sometimes by how you say something that the person is not serious. The parent becomes frustrated beyond and says to the child, I'm going to kill you if you don't stop. They don't want to kill their child. That may sound like that to a child, so I think you really have to watch what you say. But if you write it, the tone of your voice, the frustration, the sarcasm is missing. I was told, the Rambam once said that if you're going to say something, think. If you're going to write something, think twice. If you're going to and I'll one-up the Rambam if I can. If you're going to send something by an email or text, think 10 times. Because when you write a letter to a friend, it generally is not sent out to the world. It's generally your friend gets it. Maybe he shows it to his friend. You send me an email, I can send it to everybody I know. And they will send it to everybody they know. And pretty soon, 100,000 people will know that you behaved like a jerk. Or that you said something so offensive that it can't be ever taken back, because you can never find all of the people who got it. And it could come back and haunt you 10 years later, 15 years later. It could come back and keep you from being the judge. I know this sounds ridiculous to people who are 15 years old, but if you engage in something offensive by email or text, and you are later going to be considered for a chashuva appointment, or for a job, or for a shidduch, and someone who doesn't like you saved it just for that occasion, you're in trouble. If you were a young girl and you exchange an inappropriate picture with the boyfriend of the moment, recognize that that picture is forever. And your boyfriend of the moment is not always your boyfriend for life. It's rare that when you are at that age and you exchange this narishkeit, that you end up marrying the person you exchange it with. And even then, you end in divorce. And it's used against you. So why am I talking to a room full of smart kids and parents who are smart about this? Because no one talks about it. I see commercials every night about the dangers of texting while driving. Sort of like, when we were growing up, they used to write on the back of a cigarette box, the Surgeon General says, smoking has been linked to cancer. It didn't work, because most of the people kept on smoking. Today, you have horribly graphic, offensive commercials about people with no lungs or holes in their throat trying to take a shower, and they're talking to you about dying from emphysema. Boy, those commercials hit you between the eyes if you're still smoking. That's what is happening here with the technology. Don't text while drive. I see that everywhere. It's on billboards. No one puts out a commercial just talking about generally the dangers of texting, the dangers of sending out an errant email. You know how some of the biggest financial calamities happen? By hitting reply all. When you don't mean to hit reply all. I've done it. And I'm the one who's talking about it. It's by accident, but when it happens, oh my God. Could that be embarrassing? It could be career-ending. It could cost you your job. It could cost you your reputation. So please, be careful. There is a part of this yeshiva, which I'm very happy to see, that extols the virtues of defending Eretz Yisrael. You go into the hall where they were serving coffee, and you have really beautiful pictures of boys who graduated from this yeshiva, who became soldiers in Eretz Yisrael. And it's the only place where when I'm at the Kotel, many of the people who are at the Kotel crying or asking Hashem to help them or protect them are young boys with rifles strapped across their shoulder. And every time I see it, I'm 67 years old. I've been going to Eretz Yisrael for 48 years, 50, 20, 40 years. I was there 2 times in the last 10 days. And I still, when I go to the Kotel and I see that, it still gets to me that we have from boys, we're in Kippot, or at the Kotel, davening to Hashem, who are also out there protecting Eretz Yisrael. And can you imagine if we didn't have the army? Can you imagine if Hamas had the stronger army? There'd be no Jews. There'd be no Eretz Yisrael. And we live in a world where Israel does not get a fair shake. We live in a world, I deal with the media. So I am a media expert. If you read about me, they will tell you that what I'm able to do better than anyone, they say, is deal with the media in terms of being able to level the playing field. And lately, I've taken what I consider to be the knowledge and experience and maybe some talent and started to use it for Eretz Yisrael, because we have everything good there except public relations. We have the best medicine. We have the best finances. We have the best technology. We have the best soldiers. We have the best farmers. We have the best people learning. We have the best everything except public relations. Israel doesn't do it well. I've sat on a plane with major government officials, and I've said to them, you need people who speak like me, not a retired general who speaks English as a 7th language. You need to be understood. When they have Hannah Ashrawi, who's a maniac, but she's very articulate, debating why Israel is so bad, you can't have a retired general responding who is incapable of articulating what he's trying to say. So it's gotten a lot better. And lately, the ambassadors that we have are very articulate. Many of them have gone to American schools. And you should read Ally, and you should read the prime ministers as part of your required reading here, because the history of Eretz Yisrael, very important for you to know if you're going to grow up to be a frum person. Because you need to be able to defend Eretz Yisrael when you go to colleges around the world, or even in New York, or when you go to Eretz Yisrael. Half the people in Eretz Yisrael are now against Eretz Yisrael. The entire left side of Eretz Yisrael is trying to rationalize and explain why we're bad. So you need to know what you're talking about. It's not just enough to stand up and sing Am Yisrael Chai. When you're on a college campus and there are people who are experts who are talking about BDS, the boycott of Eretz Yisrael, you need to be able to respond. Go on Google and go to this organization, Stand With Us, or One Israel Fund, and ask them to send you literature so that you read it and you understand. When you are being told that Israel is the enemy and Israel is causing the terror, you need to be able to explain why that's an intellectually dishonest answer. Now, why am I talking to that on a program that's supposed to be Kiddush Hashem, Chillul Hashem? For those of you who are wondering, I made a shahakol before I started, which is my next topic of giving people the benefit of the doubt. I think it's called Dam L'Kafskos. We spend too much time reveling in other people's sorrows. It's a very bad quality. It's not a quality, it's a very bad trait in the Jewish community. We spend a lot of time talking Lashon Hara. We spend a lot of time talking about the most recent scandal. You know, and I'm often somewhere involved on the fringes perhaps, and you have no idea how many people come up to me on Shabbos and they say, well, what really happened? So why is that any of your business? Why don't you want to say instead to me, if there's anything I can do to help these people, let me know and I'll be ready to help them. That's what I want to hear from a Jew on Shabbos. For those of you that haven't about Shalom, I sit alone. The only people who sit next to me are my grandchildren. You know why? Because I don't want to talk about this stuff. I want to have at least one day when you don't have to engage in that type of discussion, which is A, none of your business, and B, no good comes of it. And most of the time, it's by very nice people who think they mean well. And it's really not right. So I gave an award to a brilliant oncologist at the Israel Cancer Research Fund, which my wife and I support for many years. And I gave an award to one of the most, one of those brilliant oncologists who deals with aggressive cancers, and most of his patients who come there are terminal. And I gave him an award. And we sit down and he says to me, I've always wanted to meet you, Mr. Brafman. I said, why? He said, you and I have a lot in common. I said, what do we have in common? He said, well, no one's ever happy to see me and no one's ever happy to see you. And I looked at him and I said, that's an interesting observation. I'll tell you why you're wrong. When you lose, they die. When I lose, I get letters. You don't deal with humiliation. No one has ever faulted anyone who got cancer. The family grows stronger. The community rallies to their support. The kids become closer. The spouses become closer. You screw up royally in my world, and you're in the New York Times or in Buses Nayas. Thank God we have that organization. and you're on one of those websites, and your life is never the same afterwards. And while there's a couple of close friends may rally to your support, to the rest of the community, you're fodder for Lashon Hara forever. And the humiliation factor is one of the most difficult of the issues I deal with. No one blames you when you get sick. The community says kill them for you. When you come into my life, I'm often the only person who's willing to talk nicely to you. So I'm not trying to make this to be a whole downer. I'm not trying to say you've done nothing good, you should all be ashamed of yourself. I started by saying to the contrary. I read this article today just on the way here, a few minutes before I left. Students inducted into DRS, the Bay Lave Service Society. It's a great piece. And it singles out a number of you who have done extraordinary acts of chesed that you should be very proud of. But this should be like in the New York Times, or in the Nassau Herald, or in Newsday. It's good that it's in the Jewish community. It's needed there too. But we don't do enough to publicize the good stuff. Israel is the only army in the world who was accused of using disproportionate, excessive force every time it does something in response to an attack. The United States is never faulted. We killed half of Doctors Without Borders a couple of months ago by an errant bomb that landed in a hospital. 27 people were killed. It was a news story. But did you see the United Nations condemn them? Did you see countries calling them racist or apartheid? Did you see anything like what happens in Eretz Yisrael? I went on Fox News because I couldn't take it anymore, and they owe me so I can get on when I want to. And you Google me and you'll see my piece on Hannity during the war last year in Gaza, when Israel was being criticized for using disproportionate force. And the point I made is that, the New York Times and the national media, is BBC and Sky News, is so intellectually dishonest when it comes to the coverage of Eretz Yisrael that the world starts to believe what they hear. And I said there, billions of dollars of aid went to Gaza to build hospitals and schools and housing, and they were used to build terror tunnels. Where is the outrage? Where is the accountability? That money came from the United States, from the United Nations. We were criticized for a missile hit a UN center. There were Hamas missiles in the UN center. It was a launching pad. Why isn't someone asking how those missiles got into the UN center? You can't put a basement full of missiles in the United Nations facility without anybody there noticing. Nobody asked that question. And when I said on Hannity, we had 3,000 missiles coming from Gaza into Sderot and Ashkelon. And I did a cross-examination of the Palestinian who gave the orders to shoot, of the Hamas general gave the orders to shoot. And it's not because I'm an excellent cross-examiner. Simple questions. When you pulled the trigger, did you have any idea where that weapon was going to land? No. Were you hoping it would hit a population center? A civilian population center? Yes. Were you hoping that it would kill as many Israelis as possible? Men, women, and children? Of course. And the only reason it didn't was because the Iron Dome intercepted the missile. Is that correct? Yes. So the body count is not a fair discussion. I said, would you be happy if there were 20,000 or 50,000 Israelis killed and only 3,500 Palestinians? And they call them civilians? Who identified the people who were killed as civilians? Were they wearing uniforms? Nobody wears uniforms there. When you take a child and you tie him to a target so the child will be killed when Israel hits the target, we kill the child. No one goes into it and no one defends us. So you need to do it. And now I'm talking to the kids here. You can't just stand up and say, oh, I'm going to go join the Israeli army. That's good if that's what you want to do, and Hashem should watch over you. But you need to be able to defend it in a discussion. You need to have mock debates here, where one side is taking the Hamas side and the terrorist side, and one side takes the side of Eretz Yisrael. And I'm going to win every one of those debates on behalf of Eretz Yisrael, not because I'm a good lawyer, because a good lawyer still needs good facts. We have the facts, but you need to know the facts. You need to understand that Israel is the only army in the world that telegraphs the people who live in a house that they should vacate the house before we fire onto that house. We didn't do it in Vietnam. We didn't do it in Iraq. We didn't do it in Afghanistan. I remember when the war started under Bush and we had the days of shock and awe. Go Google it. Most of you kids weren't alive then. Were too young. See if there's one article that deals with the civilian body count. I will bet you hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who had nothing to do with any part of the war were killed. That's war. When we bombed Dresden at the end of World War II, more Germans were killed than Americans. Does that mean the German Nazis were the good guys? Israel is the only place where those standards are applied. And it's wrong. But it's not enough to talk about it in a yeshiva. If you go to a university and some jerk gets up there and tries to distort this issue, that's part of Kiddush Hashem. Not to cower in fear because you're unencumbered by the knowledge and you don't have the facts and you don't understand, so you're afraid to open your mouth. We need Jews who can speak publicly on issues that affect Eretz Yisrael and Yiddishkeit. And you're the generation who can do it. You know, my grandparents, two of them were murdered in Auschwitz. The ones who survived, they were broken people because of what they saw. So it was very hard for them to do things because they were afraid of the government. They lived under tyranny where the government was the enemy, where the government killed their whole family. So all they wanted was to be left alone. It was a remarkable generation. They raised their kids, they built yeshivas, they built shuls, they restarted Yiddishkeit after Yiddishkeit was almost destroyed forever. So it's an enormously brilliant, courageous generation. Many of them died young. Very few are still alive. Then my generation, we grew up with some prejudice, but we had it easy compared to them. And now your generation has no excuse. You have the best of everything. Your government helps this school survive. And a famous Rebbe once said, if you're going to take from the government, abide by the rules. That's A. And if you're going to take from the government, you should be prepared to support the government. So I'm not talking about you taking on the United States of America. You can disagree with our policies. God knows you can disagree with our policies towards Israel. But do it in a menschlich, intelligent, smart way. Don't just throw stones. You need to stand up and be counted as proud Jews, American Jews. If it wasn't for American Jews, can you imagine if it wasn't for the United States Congress? Do you imagine how dire Israel's condition would be? And despite having the best army, and despite having the best chayalim in the world, they need us. And it doesn't mean you have to go there and fight. It means you have to stand here at times and fight. And part of the fight is public relations. And Israel doesn't do public relations well. So you need to do it well. I'll give you a perfect example. The biggest scandal, if you will, or the biggest criticism Israel endured a couple of years ago was when they boarded a boat from Turkey on its way to Gaza. They boarded the boat, people were killed, and Israel was criticized for blockading Gaza, and no one could get the facts out. And I remember talking to a military guy, and he said, let me ask you a question. This is how I would do it. There is a boat coming to Gaza from Turkey. We are going to board this boat. We're telling the world we're going to board it just to inspect that it doesn't contain military equipment or components that can be used to create weapons. That's our right. We intend to board it peacefully. We don't want to encounter any resistance, and we're not looking to kill or harm anyone. Make that pronouncement a week before you board the boat. Do it so that when you board the boat and your soldiers are attacked, you have the ability to say, we tried to do this peacefully. We have the right under the agreement to inspect shipments to Gaza. We're not looking to stop humanitarian equipment. Instead, I think the military people said surprise is a better element. We're going to do it in the middle of the night. We're going to drop soldiers from a helicopter. And a lot of people got killed. I'm not condemning Israel. They had a right to board the boat. But the public relations of something that happens is sometimes worth as much as the substance, because the sound bites. You know, I've learned in my life to talk about sound bites. You know, the newspaper asks you a question. They're going to give you 3 lines in an 800-word story. So you need to say in 3 lines what it is that's important for you to get out. So we need to talk about it, and we need to do it in a respectful, dignified way. We can't just respond on a college campus to someone who is essentially a terrorist at heart by just calling them a terrorist. We need to respond effectively with facts and with knowledge. So I am, pleased to spend New Year's Day here. I'm not looking for any business. I'm not looking to hire anyone, and I'm not looking to answer any questions. Because every time I do, I just make trouble or I get in trouble. So I'm not coming here for any ulterior motive. But it's rare that you have the opportunity to talk to a couple of hundred people about things that I think are important to all of us. And what I'm hoping is that the people in this room will say, you know, we heard some really interesting things. Not because I need you to promote me. Thank you very much. I'm promoted. I want you to share some of this with your friends who are not here, and with your parents who are not here, and with your mothers and fathers who are not here. And I want the mothers and the fathers who are here and the parents who are here to understand something. Our children learn from us. You would be surprised how often I look at my children and I see some of me in them. And it's very comforting when I see something good. When I see my kids involved in chesed, or when I see my kids doing chesed. It's very comforting for me to know that they understand the importance of chesed. And with chesed comes derech eretz. And you know, the few phrases that I'm able to quote accurately is, you know, there's a statement, we've said it 1,000 times, but we never think about it. Derech eretz kadma Torah. So I don't care how frum you are. Maybe someone else in this room does. Because if you are very frum and you know how to learn, but you don't conduct yourself with derech eretz, as far as I'm concerned, your Torah knowledge is worthless. That's a terrible thing for Brafman to say that Torah knowledge could be worthless. But Torah knowledge without derech eretz, it may not be worthless, but it's certainly worth less than if you are conducting yourself appropriately, not just when you learn, but when you interact with the world. And I want to stop by just with this final. Please and thank you are easy words. I have never seen a frum kid say thank you to one of the guys behind the counter at the pizza store. Rarely. Please. At the Dunkin' Donuts store. What do you want? Dozen donuts. Please may I have a dozen donuts. You know why? Because these are minimum wage workers. Many of them from foreign countries. And the only interaction they will ever have with our community is you ordering a jelly donut. And if you say please, and you say thank you, at least they will not have a distasteful view of a yeshiva boy. But if you come in there like a Bilda Chaya, and you conduct yourself like a non-respectful person, that's the image they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. So you want to have Kiddush Hashem and Chillul Hashem. I'm going to stop by telling a story that some of you may have heard. It's a true story. And it's a great story. And it involves my son. My son is the big Talmid Chacham in Eretz Yisrael, but he's still my son. And when we grew up, he and I went to a lot of baseball games. So when he came in the last time he was here, I said to him, there's a Mets game on Sunday. Come with me. I miss going to ball games with you. And because he's a good kid who believes in keeping up an aim, he pulled himself away from Beis Medrash, and we went to a Mets game. And it was for shared, because you know what happened? I've been going to the ball games for 50 years. I've never caught a foul ball. Never. And it's, for those of you who go to ball games, for some reason catching this ball is very, very important. And people jump out of the upper deck for $12 ball. They risk suicide. So for America, it's a big thing. So we're sitting in Hashem seats, and a ball comes right towards my son. And I'm in a baseball hat, a t-shirt, and jeans. And he's in black pants with a white shirt, big black velvet yarmulke, and his tzitzis are out. And he stands up and he catches the ball. Stunned. And right below him is a little kid, maybe 5 years old, with red hair, an Irish kid with a baseball glove, and the saddest face I've ever seen in my life, because my son caught the ball over where he was waiting with his glove. And my son took the ball, reached down, and gave it to him. He was on the Jumbotron, you know, the big TV? And everyone within 5 sections got up and applauded. And I turned to him and I said, David, if you learn the rest of your life, you will never make as big a Kiddush Hashem as you just made. You know why? Because tomorrow at the water coolers, or the coffee clutches, where all of these goyim are going to be, a couple of them are going to say, I saw a Jewish guy catch a ball and he gave it to a kid. If you had kept the ball, you'd say some Jewish bastard took the ball away from a little kid with the glove. I said, in a minute, you change at least some of these people into thinking that you can wear a yarmulke, wear tzitzis, and white shirt and black pants in 100 degrees to a ball game, and yet be a superstar mensch. Thank you very much.